frictional force. This video describes about dynamic friction. A small description about static friction is also followed. First, let us concentrate on kinetic or dynamic friction. Theoretically, it is a force produced by the bodies which are in relative movement with one another. Whenever there is a relative movement between the bodies, this force is produced in order to retard the motion of the bodies. Let us consider a diagram. Imagine a road like this and a block like this, which is pulled by a force F. So when the block is moving on the road means a new force develops in between the block and the road. This force we call it as friction force. This force offers resistance or it retards the block movement. This can be applied anywhere. Whenever a body is moving with respect to some other body, or whenever a body is in a relative motion with some body, there you can find this type of frictional force, which is generally called as dynamic friction, since the bodies are in dynamic movement, hence the name. And mathematically, this frictional force can be defined as like this. Frictional force is directly proportional to the normal force. So a new term comes here, that is normal force. Here, what is this normal force is all about means, let us consider another one example. Consider a table and ball. Suppose if you are placing a ball on a table means, if a table is not having a sufficient strength to hold the ball means, the table will break and it will allow the ball to get down. Suppose consider if it is having sufficient strength means, that strength will not allow the ball to get down as we have seen previously. So what is that force which holds that ball not to get down means, that is a force we call it as normal force, which is always perpendicular to the plane which it produces. Okay, here the table produces the normal force, hence the normal force is perpendicular to the table, which is of course 90 degree. Let us come to the original figure. Here you can see the rod is holding the block so as it does not get down as shown in figure. And this is a type of reaction force. Okay, this normal force. Hence we can write the frictional force is proportional to normal force. And removing this proportional, we can write it as proportionality constant, which is mu. Here mu is nothing but coefficient of friction. Coefficient of friction means between the block and rod, we will be having a coefficient of friction. Suppose if the block is moving on a cement road means, the coefficient of friction between those two will be a different one. Suppose a block is moved on a glassy surface means, the coefficient of friction between that will be a different one. So whenever two bodies are in relative motion, there exists a coefficient of friction, but based upon the roughness of the surfaces, this coefficient of friction will differ. Okay. Now, so coefficient of friction can be rewritten like this. That is, on numerator we have frictional force and denominator we have normal force. And the abbreviations are defined here for your reference. Let us move into the static friction. Static friction is a frictional force that exists between the stationary bodies. Whenever the bodies are not in movement means, a frictional force develops there. Okay, that type of frictional force is called as static force. Okay, you can imagine example like this. Suppose a slopy surface is flat and you are having a cube here. Now the cube is at rest. Maybe you may be just imagining why not the cube may be moving. Here the cube is not moving because of the frictional force which resists its movement. The cube is at rest. If not means the cube will go down. That resistant force which does not allow this cube for its movement is called as static friction. Okay. Whenever such friction happens, or whenever such friction is produced between the non-moving or stationary bodies, at such a conditions we call that force to be a static friction. When this cube starts to move means the frictional force, the static friction, is converted to dynamic friction. Okay, dynamic friction is produced between those two bodies. Okay, with this understanding, let us conclude this video. Thank you.